Aristotle did not believe happiness was a feeling. He believed it was an activity. That single distinction, between something felt and something done, may be the most consequential idea in the entire history of philosophy. And it has been almost completely forgotten. Around 350 BC, Aristotle composed the Nicomachean Ethics, named, most likely, for his son Nicomachus. It is a systematic investigation into one question: what does it mean for a human being to live well? His answer was built around a Greek word, Eudaimonia. We translate it as happiness. But that translation is, in a precise sense, a catastrophe. Because eudaimonia does not describe how you feel. It describes what you are doing with your life. Today, most of what we call the pursuit of happiness, the chasing of pleasant states, the avoidance of discomfort, the endless optimization of mood, Aristotle would have recognized as something else entirely. Not flourishing. Simply distraction. 3 of his central arguments have been buried under centuries of misreading and cultural noise. In the next 10 minutes, we recover them. Each one builds on the last. And the final insight carries a demand that is genuinely difficult to ignore. Before we go further, if this kind of philosophy interests you, subscribe. We publish new videos every week on ideas that actually change how you think. In Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle writes that the highest good is something final, pursued always for its own sake and never as a means to something else. He identifies this as eudaimonia. And then he says something that should stop us cold. He writes, happiness is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Not a condition. Not a reward. An activity. The Greek word he uses for activity is energia, meaning a being at work. Something is eudaimon not when it rests in a pleasant state but when it is operating at full capacity in accordance with what it fundamentally is. Think about what that means. For Aristotle, a knife is excellent when it cuts cleanly. An eye is excellent when it sees clearly. And a human being is excellent, is eudaimon, when it exercises its distinctly human capacities, reason, deliberation, virtue, in the actual conduct of a life. This is why Aristotle famously says in Book 1, one swallow does not make a spring. A single moment of joy does not constitute happiness. One pleasant afternoon does not add up to a flourishing life. Eudaimonia requires duration. It requires sustained activity across a complete life. Now here is the part most people miss. Aristotle is not saying emotions are irrelevant. He is saying they are insufficient. A happy life includes pleasure, but pleasure is a byproduct of excellent activity, not the goal of it. When you chase the feeling directly, you lose the activity that would have produced it naturally. This inversion, pursuing the byproduct while neglecting the source, is not a modern invention. Aristotle saw it clearly in Athens, in 350 BC. He simply did not expect it to last 2,500 years. Understanding that happiness is an activity and not a state raises an immediate question: what kind of activity? What exactly does Aristotle mean by virtue, and why does he think most people misunderstand it entirely? In Book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle introduces a distinction that should permanently alter how we think about character. He says that virtues of character, courage, justice, temperance, generosity, are not innate. They are not handed to you at birth. They are not unlocked by a single insight or a powerful emotional experience. They are built. Slowly. Through repetition. He writes, we become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts. The Greek term for the settled disposition that results from this repetition is hexis, often translated as habit, though the word carries more weight than that. A hexis is a stable state of character, a way of being oriented toward the world, that has been forged through consistent action across time. This has a profound implication. It means that virtue is not primarily about your intentions. It is about your behavior, repeated, under real conditions, when it costs you something. Aristotle is explicit on this point. A person is not just merely because they intend to be just. They are just because they consistently act justly, in their dealings with others, in the distribution of what is owed, in the face of competing interests. The same logic applies to courage, temperance, and every other virtue in his catalogue. Now there is a tension here that Aristotle acknowledges. You need some degree of virtue to begin performing virtuous acts. You cannot act courageously if you are completely consumed by fear. His answer is that we begin by imitating, by being raised in communities that model virtuous behavior, by having examples before us. The initial actions may feel forced. But over time, the disposition forms. The action becomes natural. This is why Aristotle places such weight on education and on the social environment in which character is developed. You cannot build virtue in isolation. You build it inside a life lived among others, where the stakes are real and the choices are constant. But if virtue is a practice, built through action, expressed in community, Aristotle still has not answered a question that shadows his entire project. What about fortune? What about the things that happen to you that you did not choose and cannot control? There is a version of Aristotle that gets taught in introductory courses that is almost entirely wrong. In this version, Aristotle is a pure virtue ethicist. Cultivate your character. Develop your rational faculties. Virtue is sufficient for the good life. Everything else is noise. This is not what Aristotle said. In Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle explicitly acknowledges that eudaimonia requires what he calls external goods, ta ektos agatha. He lists them with uncomfortable precision. A person cannot fully flourish, he argues, if they are profoundly ugly. If they are utterly without friends. If they lack children. If they are of very low birth. He goes further. He says that a person who suffers devastating misfortunes, the loss of close friends, the death of children, extreme poverty, serious illness, cannot be called eudaimon in any full sense of the word. This is a striking admission. It means that Aristotle, unlike his student the Stoics would later become, does not believe that virtue alone is sufficient. External circumstances matter. Luck matters. Fortune matters. And here is the philosophical tension he is trying to navigate. If fortune matters, then a good life depends partly on what happens to you rather than what you do. That seems to threaten the entire architecture of his ethics. His resolution is careful. He does not say that fortune determines happiness. He says it is a necessary but insufficient condition. You can have all the fortune in the world and fail to live well because you do not exercise virtue. But if you are stripped of all external goods, health, friendship, basic resources, your capacity to exercise virtue is genuinely diminished. The practically important insight is this. Aristotle is not counseling fatalism about fortune. He is counseling realism. Acknowledge what you need. Work to secure what is genuinely required for a flourishing life. Do not pretend you are indifferent to things that actually matter. And then, within the space that fortune allows, commit entirely to virtue. This is a more honest account of human life than either pure Stoic detachment or modern comfort-seeking. It admits difficulty. It does not promise immunity from suffering. It simply insists that how you act, inside whatever life you are given, is the part that is yours. There is one more dimension of eudaimonia that Aristotle develops, a dimension so counterintuitive that even serious readers of the ethics tend to underestimate it. It concerns not what you do in the world, but what you do inside your own mind. In Book 10 of the Nicomachean Ethics, near the end of his entire investigation, Aristotle makes a claim that surprises almost everyone who encounters it for the first time. After spending 9 books on virtue, friendship, pleasure, justice, and the active life of the excellent citizen, he says that the highest form of human happiness is not virtuous action in the world. It is contemplation. Theoria. Pure, sustained, rational inquiry into the deepest truths of things. He writes that the life of contemplation is the best and most pleasant for man, since this more than anything else makes a man what he is. He calls it the most self-sufficient of activities, meaning it carries its value entirely within itself. It requires no external audience. It produces no external product. It is pursued purely for its own sake. And he makes a further claim that is theological in everything but name. He says this activity most closely resembles that of the divine. In Aristotle's framework, the divine intellect, what he calls the unmoved mover in the metaphysics, is pure thought thinking itself. When a human being engages in genuine contemplation, they participate, however briefly, in the most perfect form of existence there is. Now, this cannot be understood as a license for withdrawal from ordinary life. Aristotle is not recommending that we abandon our relationships, our civic duties, our practical responsibilities. Book 10 follows 9 books that argue vigorously for the importance of virtuous action. The point is one of hierarchy. Within a life that is already ordered toward virtue and excellence, there must be space, protected, deliberate space, for serious thought. Not entertainment. Not information consumption. Thought. Slow, sustained, difficult engagement with the most important questions. What is justice? What is the good? What am I? In 350 BC, Aristotle argued that this kind of thinking is not an indulgence for the leisured few. It is the completion of what a human life is for. And perhaps nothing in his entire ethics is more foreign to us now than this. We live in an environment structured almost entirely to prevent sustained contemplation. Our attention is the commodity being sold. The deepest consequence of this is not that we are distracted. It is that we are being systematically deprived of the activity Aristotle considered the summit of human flourishing. These 3 forgotten truths, that happiness is activity, that virtue is practice, and that contemplation is the apex, do not simply explain what Aristotle believed. Together, they constitute a diagnosis of exactly how we are failing. 3 forgotten truths. Eudaimonia is not a feeling, it is an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue, sustained across a complete life. Virtue is not a trait you possess, it is a disposition you build through repeated action, in real conditions, at real cost. And at the summit of that life of action stands contemplation, the activity that Aristotle, in Book 10 of the Nicomachean Ethics, considered most fully human and most closely divine. What these 3 truths share is a common structure. They are all demanding. They do not promise relief. They do not offer a shortcut. They describe a way of life that requires continuous effort, honest self-assessment, and the protection of serious thought in a world engineered to eliminate it. Aristotle was writing in Athens, around 350 BC. He was addressing students who had the full complexity of human life ahead of them. He did not tell them to optimize their mood. He told them to become the kind of people capable of living well, and then to live that way, every day, for as long as they were given. That is still the challenge. Nothing has changed. Aristotle spent a lifetime studying what it means to live well. The least we can do is spend 10 minutes thinking about it. Subscribe if you want to keep thinking.